Welcome to another edition of Trunk and Tales as we take a look at what is happening in the political world. I'm Stacy Smith, and if you happen to like this program, we urge you to hit the subscribe or the like button. Now, during the GOP convention in the middle of July, the concern of the Democrats was palpable. But a couple of days later, President Biden dropped out of the race, and Vice President Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee. That has changed depressed Democrats into joyful Democrats. And as they hold their convention, there is more than optimism that Harris will win the presidency. And if she wins, will she carry the Senate as well? That is part of what we will discuss today on Trunk and Tales. And with me to talk about this is my panel of political analysts and experts, and they are the former governor of Pennsylvania, Republican Tom Corbett. Mr. Corbett also served as the state attorney general and as the U.S. attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Mr. Corbett teaches law right now. Also joining us is Keith Schmidt. Keith's background was as the state director for former Republican Senator Rick Santorum, and Keith also consulted on Santorum's 2012 presidential campaign. Keith has his own consulting firm. Also joining us is Jim Byrne. He is the chairman emeritus of the state Democratic Party in Pennsylvania. Jim also served in the local county government and in city government, and he practices law in the city of Pittsburgh. Also with us, Joe Mystic. Joe's background includes consulting Democrats across the state and serving in city government. Joe teaches law, and you can read his thoughts on life and politics in the Tribune Review. Thank you all for joining us. I say this almost every time, but it's a marvelous summer so far if you love politics, because you just don't know what is going to happen next. Now, since the date that Harris became the nominee, the polls have shifted dramatically to the point where nationally she is in a dead heat. And the swing states show basically the same thing, that it's a tie race between Harris and Trump. Joe, you're one of the two Democrats on this panel, so I'll ask you first. The Democrats in Chicago might be giddy, but there are still 76 days until the election. So can Harris maintain this momentum?
Well, she certainly hopes to, but there is a lot of campaign left, and a lot of things, as we've seen, can turn on a dime. We've had Joe Biden deciding not to run. We had an assassination attempt. We have a new presidential candidate with entering the race with about 90 days to go. I mean, it's just an amazing political season. I can say this, though, that, strangely, her campaign is mimicking in some ways Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. He ran what would be called a movement campaign. There was a movement out there that was even bigger than he was. And to some extent, they pushed him out in front of that movement, and he ran with it. This feels like a movement campaign. This feels like there are issues here that people have embraced and are enthusiastic about, and they're going to fight for. And it's bigger than any single candidate. But she is the candidate, and she's the one who's out front. So it has those kinds of similarities. Now, I'm not worried about my Republican friends on this panel because so many true Republicans have endorsed the vice president, the Democratic candidate, Harris. And it's a strange thing. Judge Ludwig, I don't know if you guys know him much, but he's among the most conservative of appellate judges appointed by George H.W. Bush. Maybe too conservative to have been nominated for the Supreme Court, although he would have been a tremendous Supreme Court justice. He endorsed Harris. So we're in some strange times here, and I can't wait to see how this unfolds.
I think that begs the question, though, and maybe the governor or Keith can answer this as well, and that is, do you think people who, if Joe is correct, Republicans who are saying they are endorsing Kamala Harris, is it an endorsement of Kamala Harris, or is it, I don't like Donald Trump?
I'll speak up on that one first, if that's okay, Keith. I think that is totally a reaction to the candidate, Donald Trump. He is a unique individual. He's been a disruptor to politics that people were used to throughout his years doing this now since 15 when he started running. There is a visceral reaction by the average citizen one way or the other to this candidate. And the change of Biden to Harris was beneficial to the Democrat Party, without a doubt. It created enthusiasm. There wasn't an enthusiasm there before, and it knocked the former president. It knocked him off stride because his campaign, in his mind, he was always going after Biden. Now he has to go after Harris, and he hasn't adjusted to that yet. He's still trying to use his same tactics, the name calling, the ridiculing, and I don't think it's working that well. And some Republicans have said enough is enough, and we want to go forward. And if we have to vote for a Democrat to stop him, that's what they're doing. Keith?
Keith, your thoughts?
I was going to thought we'd pivot to Jim.
Okay, well, we can do that if you'd
I'd
prefer.
like to hear what Jim has to say before I react.
All right, great. Jim, you've got the stage now.
All right, Keith. All right. So, sure. Governor, I think you're right. We've talked on this show for a long time and others that we've done together about something needing to happen to get Mr. Trump off the stage or out of this dynamic in the GOP, for the GOP to get back to the party of Reagan, of Teddy Roosevelt, of Ike, of Keith's idol Reagan, who Keith respects immensely, and many do in both sides of the aisle. Of H.W. Bush, of even of Nixon, who formed the EPA. Any of those folks in today's GOP, the MAGA GOP, would get booed off the stage. They would not win a primary. Traditional conservatism, less government, etc., is not what this is about anymore. You look at the names of not just the judge who has stepped up. Last night I turned on the convention and I thought I was watching a Republican convention. 20 years ago, I would have been. There was a chief of staff for the Republican First Lady. There was a well-respected mayor from Arizona. There were others stepping up, and there will be others to step up at the GOP to speak. They're speaking on behalf of a Democrat. They're putting country over party. They want to get back to the days of Reagan, of Bush, of Ike, of Governor Corbett, of friends like Melissa Hart, who I used to do shows like this with. Back to common sense, pragmatic, conservative politics, and they can't do it with this obstruction hijacking the party and making it a cult of personality. So they're going to take a step back in order for their party to right itself, so we can get back to those old-fashioned conversations about which ideology, which platform is best suited to serve Americans. We can't do that with this guy, and he has no path to making it about anything but himself, revenge, and payback. And he gets more and more embarrassing as the days go by and as he continues to sink in the polls.
How's that, Keith?
I got my back against the wall.
No, you don't.
Listen, I've said on this program a number of times, elections are about choices. I was not particularly happy, as I'm sure most of the people on this panel, with the choices that we were put forth a few months ago, the sitting president and the former president. And I have the same misgivings now. I mean, these to me are not great choices, but these are the choices we're left with. We now have the former president who wants to come back, and we have a vice president who absolutely has inspired some excitement, and rightly so. There is a honeymoon. There is a bump. There was a period of time on a series of events that happened that really put the current president on the heels, and there was a sense of panic in the fact that the Democrats might even lose both houses of Congress, and the fundraising was drying up. So I could see that there is a re-energizing movement among rank and file Democrats, that there's meat on the bone, and she got a bump. It's a competitive race, like you said. It's they're virtually tied, and the swing states are now almost virtually tied. So I get it, but I still believe that Kamala Harris is vulnerable. I mean, her background makes her a vulnerable target for the former president, and there's absolutely a path for him to retake the White House. But the interesting thing is, we're so fatigued right now. And in many ways, us old bulls who've done this a long time remember when Labor Day was kind of like the beginning,
Yes.
and we're like, when's this going to end? So it's hard for me to put into my brain what's happened in the last what 30 or 40 days. How many times the pendulum has swung, and a couple times when I thought the pendulum was stuck, like there's no way to swing it again, and it swung now freely.
Yeah.
So hold on to your hats. I mean, we got, what do you say, 75 days? I mean, this lead, I mean, virtually, I think we're going to a photo finish. I don't think either of these candidates are gonna have 350, 400 electoral votes and 55% of the vote. I think it's going to be a photo finish, which we're all worried about because neither side seems to be prepared to accept outcomes right now, and that's a larger concern for Americans. And nobody wants to see Trump back in the White House, and vice versa. But it really depends on where the pendulum's swinging in 75 days. Timing in politics is a lot of times out of our control, but this could be one of those moments where what is the timing and what is on people's mind the last 7 days leading up to the vote? It's an interesting quandary. I mean, we're in interesting times, but I still believe anybody that counts the president out, because the former president out, because of this enthusiasm, hasn't looked at the last 45 days. I mean, things change on a dime.
Point to one Democrat who is going to challenge the election results who has said if we don't win, it's fixed, because I can't think of one. I can only think of one Republican who's saying it and his followers, but I don't know of any Democrat who said that.
Yeah. Stacey, I think you have to look at what's happened locally. We have sense. We have some common sense around here. I mean, just look at what happened in Allegheny County. Democrats who were not happy with progressives taking over their party stepped up, crossed over to the Republican side, voted for the Republican nominee, who's the Democratic incumbent of the district attorney's office, and carried that off. We pulled that off. Now, we pulled that off for the good of the community. Democrats and Republicans pulled that off for the good of our community. And if you look at what's happening locally, you'll get a better feel for where the people are than looking at this schism on the national front. I think that the fact that Republicans are having a hard time dumping Donald Trump is really because of his level of vindictiveness and hatefulness and just sheer meanness. He's a formidable threat to any Republican who crosses him, and that's held them down. And I think maybe some of them are seeing a way out.
Well, and I think a lot of that has to do with Joe, with his individual wealth that allows him to go after anybody
I agree,
he
Governor.
would want to
I
go
agree.
after.
Yeah.
The others, the senators that are out there, the members of the House, governors, and so forth, they don't have that ability. But he has been a populist to a group of people that demonstrate how divided this country really is. We have Republicans who want to continue with a Republican. We have Democrats who want to continue with a Democrat. Yet I think if you were sitting at a coffee bar having breakfast and talk with many of them, they would say, don't we have better choices? But we don't. And we're looking at this election.
So basically, what you're saying, Governor, is that when you're talking about people sitting around the coffee shop there and talking about this, is that they don't like Donald Trump, and while they may vote for Kamala Harris, they're not necessarily in love with her, which is what Keith's point was.
I think that's absolutely true. Now, the one who, in the long term, in history, that comes out the winner in this, in my mind, is Biden, because Biden stepped down. He passed the torch reluctantly, but he passed the torch because I really don't believe that he was going to win, or at least his party didn't think that he was going to win, that he was a liability. And frankly, maybe physically wasn't prepared to take on another 4 years. He will be the one, if Harris is to win, yes, she won, but it wasn't without Biden doing what he did.
Of course. Yeah. I mean,
We're all
look
very
what-
familiar with politicians who find it hard to walk away from power. It's very, very rare when they voluntarily step away from power, and Joe Biden did that, and that's a credit to him.
Put the institution first, and they will love you for it.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was several commentators, and even I believe it may have been Politico, but I'm not sure it was Politico. Said that when the president was giving his speech, what I'm calling a farewell speech, basically at the convention the other night, which was too late for most people to stay up to watch. They were holding up signs that said "Thank you, Joe," and they said, "It's a two-sided thank you, Joe. One for everything you've done over 50 years in politics, and thank you for stepping down."
Right.
I mean, that's what a lot of
Right.
people
Yeah.
felt.
Thank you
Uh,
for
I
changing the
believe that's
dynamic of the race and saving the union in progress,
Yeah.
in the process. I mean, yeah, that some people would rather go with Ms. Harris versus Trump, but it's not. This is not a campaign of issues. This is a campaign about the future of the Democratic Republic as we know it, and that's how the GOP is seeing it. Who are finally have had enough of Mr. Trump, and they're not afraid of him anymore. And watch for those cracks to continue to widen as we move closer to November.
I think Jim's right. It's not a campaign of issues. And unless it becomes a campaign of issues, then the former president's going to lose. I mean, he can win if he makes it about the issues. I mean, in the end, I don't believe America's in love with either one of these candidates. But I think the issues, not the bombastic side, but the issues do work for the former president. If so many people say the same, oh, I like his policies or I like what he did, I don't like him. But and people are very impatient. So what I remind people of 2/3 of the American people that say we're on the wrong track, he's got to capitalize on that. I think he has to be transparent. If I had his ear for 5 minutes, I'd say, Mr. President, you're going to have to you're going to have to differentiate yourself from the Democratic nominee. Tell us in the first 100 days what's your agenda. Be willing to commit to something. What are you going to do about the border? What are you going to do about the Middle East? What are you going to do about inflation? All these talking points that you think you could do it better. I want specifics. Give us a contract with America. Tell us specifics so we have an understanding of if we choose to let you back in the Oval Office, what does that mean to Americans? So I'm really interested in that happening. But I do I don't mean this in a mean spirited way. But when you said it isn't about issues, largely it isn't right in recent days. And I mean it's at a different level, and it's at a dangerous level, because at the level it is when you're not talking specifics and issues, I think this race absolutely favors the vice president. I think we have to get into the weeds and talk about the differential between their agenda and the Republican agenda.
Well, a lot of people will say, Keith, that the vice president really hasn't put out much. She put out an economic plan, which many Democrats have panned as well, as far as price controls go, those sorts of things. She has changed her mind about fracking in Pennsylvania. She's
Thank
changed her.
goodness.
Pardon me?
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are going to say, where does she stand? Is this just a political move until she gets in office?
Well, as Keith pointed out, it's not in her interest right now to be talking issues.
You're right.
Absolutely.
Keith's exactly
100%.
right. I mean, this is a very, very cagey campaign policy. This is not the time for her to be talking issues because she's winning on the other stuff.
But would the independent or the moderate Republican decide maybe just to sit out the race because they don't know what she stands for?
No, they do know what she stands for.
I would think, and it'd be interesting to watch. We have a very competitive United States Senate race here in Pennsylvania, and it's going to be very interesting on election night to see what the turnout is for that race and what the turnout is for president. Because many Republicans, just everyday Republicans that I know, friends that I know, just are not going to vote in the presidential, and they're going to go to the Senate. Some of them say, I'm not going to vote. I argue with them. You have to go and vote. There's so many other races that you need to vote on. You don't have to vote on the president if that's the case. And I think, the campaigns are for those offices, they're having a difficult time. They want to be with the former president, but they don't want to be with the former president. It makes it very difficult for everybody.
The undervote will be something to watch, especially in the swing states, Governor.
Yep.
I think the undervote is going to destroy Mr. Trump. It's absolutely going to destroy him. Even for every GOP moderate anti-MAGA that's coming over for Ms. Harris, how many are just going to sit it out because they could never vote for a Democrat? It's going to be really something to watch, and I think that's where Ms. Harris has a potential of a path to over 300 electoral votes. And we want to win this not just by a margin or a sliver. We want to beat him so bad that any attempt he has, like he did 4 years ago, to try to sue 80 times and lose, is going to be a non-starter. That's the objective. And Michelle Obama last night made it very clear. 76, 77 days to go. Don't let up on this guy. Keep him down and don't let him get up. Miss Harris's comms team I thought Obama was good in 08. The comms team for Miss Harris right now is blowing that away. They will not let him get any air in his lungs. Every time he says something ridiculous or goes off on a tangent, they are right in his face. Every time he insults the veterans, which he's doubling down on, they are right in his face. Like you're right, Stacey and everybody here. All we got to do is keep putting a microphone in front of him for the next 75 days. Do you admit that it was wrong for you to insult veterans regarding the Congressional Medal of Honor? And he will continue to say he was right. Let's let Trump be Trump, and let's just keep working hard.
All right, we need to take a break, but before we go, Jim, you said something a little bit ago that name one Democrat who would say that they would challenge the results of the election. They have challenged elections in the past, and not much is said.
That's not what I said.
Okay, tell me what you said.
Keith said there are people saying, and I took that to mean present tense about the upcoming election.
All right.
That if we don't win, it's fixed. Mr. Trump has said that. My question to Keith was, point to one Democrat right now about November that has said what Mr. Trump said, and I would say this many.
Okay, I misunderstood what you said.
All right.
Then.
Very good.
Thank you very much. Good.
Thank you.
All right, good. See, I lose these battles because I got three attorneys on with me. So there's no way.
Object to the form of the question.
Yes. Overruled. We'll take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Trunk and Tales. We're talking about the political scene nationally more than anything, but a lot of states are holding elections for Senate, as Governor Corbett has mentioned. A third of the Senate is up for re-election, and 22 of the 32 seats are held by Democrats. The map seems to favor Republicans. In fact, not one incumbent Republican election is listed as a toss-up. For the Democrats, though, there are 7 toss-up elections. But also this interesting note, of those 7 Democrats, there is only one race where the Democratic senatorial candidate is not leading his or her Republican opponent. And those Democrats are also faring better in the polls than their presidential candidates. So, Keith, as a Republican, are you concerned that the Democrats may retain control and even widen their control over the United States Senate?
No, I believe that the Republicans will take back the Senate this November. And quite frankly, if I'm wrong and my Democratic colleagues win the day, it'll be a long time before the Republicans see the majority in that chamber. I would say almost a generation. I mean, when you have 22 of 32 seats being defended by the Democrats, this is the cycle. This cycle favors us 100%. It's a third, the way it works out every 2 years. So if they can't take advantage under these circumstances, then I'm telling you, you're probably almost in our lifetime not going to see the Republicans being competitive in that chamber. So there's a lot at stake here. They're going to have to work hard, and I'm not saying they're going to take it over by a large plurality. I think they're going to end up with a majority. It will be a slim one. But if they don't, the die is cast, and the Republican Party will be on its heels for a long time. So I remain confident that, like you said, the ones that we do have to defend, we're fine. They're going to have to at some point make a decision, and I know there's people at a higher level than me in conference rooms right now determining who the 5 targets are going to be, where they're going to dump the money post Labor Day, and they're coming close to those decisions, and they're going to spend a tremendous amount of money to retake that chamber. But I warn the Republicans, we better figure this one out, because the numbers work for us in ways that they rarely work for a party in that chamber this November. Again, I believe we're going to win, but if we don't, it's going to be a dark chapter in the Senate for the Republican Party.
Well, I think this is going to be in large part, and I always hesitate to say this, a turnout election. And, it sounds like you're just restating the obvious, but the situation here is whether the Democrats now have the enthusiasm level to get out the vote. As Keith's often pointed out, Republicans are a smaller party. And if some Republicans are discouraged from voting at all, and there's going to be an undervote for president, and the Democrats really drive the turnout with this enthusiasm level, there will be coattails in these Senate races. And that's something that we have to look to.
Maintaining the energy is critical. In 77, 76 days is a very long time. But if you look at what's happening right now, whether you like what you're hearing or not from Ms. Harris and Mr. Walz, the facts are the facts. People are lining up to get into events with Ms. Harris and Mr. Walz. This enthusiasm is incredible. So while people are lining up to get in to hear what they have to say, people are walking out in the middle of Mr. Trump's tirades. That shows and that's the MAGAs. The moderates aren't even there. So yes, it's an enthusiasm gap right now, and if that doesn't change, it's going to be very difficult for the GOP, in my opinion, with this opportunity to get that chamber back. And with respect to the senators, only one of which isn't up in the polls. Let's look at all of them, and let's look at what type of coordinated campaigns are happening in each of those respective states. I know that the Harris-Walz coordinated campaign in the last 30 days here in Pennsylvania has been following the advice and looking at the map and looking at the film from what happened in 20, what happened in 2016. They're going to be up and down the 76 corridor out here, just like Coach Walz was up in Aliquippa a couple of days ago. That will move numbers. And they will study the film in each of these states where these senators are, like Mr. Obama did in 8 and again in 12, to put a team together in both chambers to come along with him when he got elected. And it's no coincidence that we're seeing these things happen around the country and in Pennsylvania, because Ms. Harris has hired the brain trust that was all around Barack Obama in 8 and 12, and they are on her team now as well. Look at what's going on. I mean, I'm seeing coordination, the likes of which I haven't seen since 8 and 12, and I think that's a significant factor.
I think the senatorial campaign here for both teams is going to be interesting. Two observations. Number one, no longer do we pull a lever or mark Republican or mark Democrat. Everybody, you have to vote on the individuals. And that, if I'm in McCormick's camp, I'm telling him we need to work on two targets: disaffected Republicans who may not come out to vote and try to get them out to vote, at least for us, and the independents, which is the growing population in this state of registered voters. It's their first time to weigh in on the election. And I would be hitting independents as hard as I could. This is an important race. We need to get the Senate. And frankly, Jim and Joe, everybody knows this. For the Republicans, they need to win at least one House to be able to block certain things or agree to certain things and actually see government have to compromise instead of being all led by one party.
Keith, if I'm on that meeting in those Republican rooms with the top dogs, I would put money in Montana without question, because he is the most vulnerable senator going in Testor, and well, unless there's something very dramatic, West Virginia is going to go Republican, and so you've already gained a seat there, and if you take Montana, the rest of them, whether it be Pennsylvania or Ohio or Nevada or Arizona or Michigan, it really doesn't matter at that point, because you've now at least, I believe, you've now taken the Senate by one vote. I may be wrong on that.
I think we're actually looking at 4 seats, because you're right. Montana's on every list. So they're going to fund that, and they're going to put money there. So they're looking at four others. And McCormick has to make a move in Pennsylvania. I mean, right now, oddly enough, the Casey campaign has successfully put him on defense. And when you do that, that's problematic. I mean, if he has something to say, and I'm sure there's ways to differentiate himself from the sitting senator, and I'm sure there's some stuff they're holding back on. But right now, if I would grade the campaign, it really disturbs me that it looks like he's playing defense, or he's answering what Senator Casey is saying about it. So either you ignore it or you just go on offense. But I think that, again, that word pendulum, I hope the pendulum swings. If he has some things that he wants to highlight and educate people about the 18 years under Senator Casey and why Pennsylvania should make a change, he needs to start leading with that, because at this point, the polls are not tightening in the way they should be to make this a competitive race.
I think he was defined by his fellow Republicans when he lost the primary to Dr. Oz. And I'm a little bit surprised at how well that stuck. He's still trying to get away from some of that stuff, the senator from Connecticut and all that stuff. But it was a pretty brutal campaign. A lot of money was invested to put him in the negative column by his own fellow Republicans, and I'm not sure he can shake it. It seemed to have stained. It's stuck with him.
Yep. All right, gentlemen, we are now out of time. I want to thank you again for joining us, and Governor Corbett and Jim Byrne and Joe Mystic and Keith Schmidt for joining us. And also, I want to thank you for joining us. And remember this, that if you like this program and you see that like or subscribe button, please hit that, and then we'll be able to continue the program. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you the next time for Trunk and Tales. Thank you.
Thank you.